Well, hello everyone. I'm Rhonda Bannard with Earth Gives. I'm the founder and executive director, and this topic of building trust within communities we serve really resonates because we're here actually to build trust with all of you. As a startup nonprofit, we're working to serve and support the impact of the environmental justice, environmental stewardship, and climate-focused nonprofits and actually boost environmental philanthropy beyond the 2% that it sits at today, which is just not going to get us to the change that we need. But we look at philanthropy in a much broader perspective. It's how we show up in the world as well. So it's not just giving dollars, it's how we give our time and our kindness in our community as well. So we're honored to have with us an amazing group of folks who are going to share. This is the second of our Community Commons Impact Makers series. And Dr. Casey Bertram has joined us through our Earth Gives Day last year, which was a very small and early start to what we're hoping to do. But obviously we built a little bit of trust in her. And when I got to meet her, wow, I was just in awe. And I knew that she had to be, or I wanted her to be in my circle. And so I am thrilled to be able to have her and her esteemed community of folks to share their wisdom on how we build trust in diverse communities, the communities that we seek to serve, and those, frankly, in our close circle. So my guess is they're going to drop a lot of wisdom for us today and leave a lot of awe in their wake. And so we're going to invite your questions, whether it's in the chat or whether it's after the panel shares its information. And as well, we intend to sort of bring back the first 4 presenters for a Q&A happy hour, where you can go deeper on some questions and learn a little bit more. And so maybe there or in direct connection with Casey that you can get some of your questions answered if they are not all answered today. So Casey, thank you for rallying your community today to share with us some important knowledge. And now we look forward to you taking us to school. So let's go.
Great. Well, thanks, Rhonda. And thanks for those really kind words. I'm really grateful to join this group today and to see all these different communities and connections come together. As Rhonda said, my name's Casey. I'm zooming in today from Moscow, Idaho, which is the ancestral lands of the Nimiipuu or Nez Perce peoples. And I'm the executive director of TIFO, which is an organization that works with communities impacted by environmental pollution. And we have projects here in North America and around the world, and I'll speak about a couple of those later. Most of our work is with communities impacted by mining, but we also work with communities impacted by pesticide contamination. We work on occupational health and safety projects, a lot of other contexts. So I'm really looking forward to sharing some of our experiences working in some truly wonderful communities. And I know there's some folks on the call who have worked in those places with us, which is fantastic. And I'm also really excited to hear from the other panelists and from the wider audience. So with that, I'm going to invite my fellow co-presenters to just do a quick introduction of themselves, where they're coming from, and which organization they're with. And I will start with Ed Galindo, since he is our elder in the panel today, and we have to have him speak first. Ed, do you want to just give us a quick 30 or 60-second intro?
I'll try, Casey. I don't know if I can make that deadline, but here I go. So Casey, thanks for inviting me. I want to talk a little bit about Casey in my limited amount of time. She's a good person with a good heart, and she knows how to make fire. And with that, she can make coffee. It's a good person to have on the planet. So thanks, Casey. Yeah, my name is Ed Galindo. I'm the CEO of the North American Research and Education Foundation, acronyms NANRAF. I have appointments at U of I in their natural resource department, ISU in biology, and Utah State in physics, and NASA. I was a NASA fellow, and that's where I got my Ph.D. And all these schools I went to just hang on to you because mainly because I'm American Indian, but mainly because I caused so much grief, they don't want to let me go. So anyway, I think maybe that's what I had. I have some more information to share, but it'd take more than 60 seconds. So thank you, Casey.
Thanks, Ed. We'll come back to you for for the stories that you're going to share in just a sec. Ro, do you mind introducing yourself next?
Yeah, hello everybody. My name is Ro Afachao, and I'm a faculty member here at the university, and also I'm the board president for ICPSD, which I will drop in the chat in a minute, so you guys can check out the link and see what we do. I'm originally from Togo, but I've been living here for more than 20 years now, and have met so many of you guys already. So special thank to Rhonda and the Casey and the respective organization for putting this together. So the organization that I represent is the Institute for Community Partnerships and Sustainable Development, and we work on the anything community empowerment in Africa, but specifically we're in Togo right now in West Africa, where we work on ecosystem restoration and we work on youth empowerment. So I'm here today to share all that experience with you all and learn from each one of your various experiences. So thank you so much for putting this together.
Thanks, Ro. Becky, do you mind introducing yourself next?
Absolutely not. Thank you so much for having me. Hi, everyone. I'm Becky Whitnock-Huber, and I'm currently in Laramie, Wyoming. I work at the University of Wyoming as a research scientist on a study that's called, it is a grant established program to stimulate competitive research called Wyoming Anticipating Climate Transitions. And I'm specifically looking at the role of knowledge co-production to build adaptive capacity of individuals, groups, and communities over time. I'm also continuing to support work that I did in partnership with Colorado State University, the Rwandan Ministry of Health and Infrastructure, the University of Rwanda, a local solar company, as well as a local community on a study that I just worked with community partners and my team in Rwanda to launch on clean energy transitions and human health. So I'm really excited to be here today, and thank you all for having me.
Thanks, Beck. So last but definitely not least, we have Austin Derglo. Austin, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Cheskal Halt, Austin Derglo, Louis West. Good day, everyone. It's good to see everyone. My name is Austin Derglo. I come from I'm a member of the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribe in Montana. I grew up on the Flathead Reservation. And I'm now in Moscow, Idaho. I'm going to school at the University of Idaho. I'm in a dual program studying law and water resources. And yeah, thank you guys for allowing me to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us, Austin. So what we'll do next is each of the panelists wants to talk for 5 or 10 minutes or however long they feel they need to tell a story to illustrate a specific topic under this broad category of building trust in communities. So we know that while everyone is feeling these impacts of environmental crisis and climate change, some people in some communities are facing greater impacts and greater disparities than others. And when Rhonda and I were chatting about this panel, I immediately thought of, having a broad perspective from a bunch of different folks, because I've worked in a lot of different countries. I've been really fortunate to work in a lot of really wonderful communities, but ultimately I am a white girl who grew up in the middle-class family in the middle of a cornfield in the Midwest. So I can't speak to the experiences of communities and people who are experiencing, greater injustices related to these issues that we're all working on. What we hope to do today is to talk about working in those places and how we can approach those opportunities to collaborate with communities respectfully and equitably. My co-presenters are really good colleagues and friends, and so I'm glad that they can talk about these issues of climate change and environmental degradation and present their perspectives. And with that, I'm going to ask, if it's okay, ask Ro to speak first a little bit about lessons learned from his work in ecosystem restoration work in Togo.
All right, yeah, thank you so much. So this is a very important topic for us specifically because it's so exciting because we came from the point of view that you could not achieve anything if you don't have community buy-in, right? And for so long, for too long, especially in international development, we see communities being given projects to implement, project being designed outside of the context and only to be implemented. And we've seen how many failures that we've registered over the years. Many big NGOs or governments or international organizations, you know, threw away many million, if not billions of dollars in doing projects that make them feel good, but did not do anything on the ground. So that's why in ICPSD, we really believe that if you wanted to support development, and I just put something in the chat as well, if you wanted to support development in countries, you really have to go do it from the community perspective because all needs are not equal, right? Each community will have their own needs. The same way that each community also will have its own structure. So our first approach in doing our project in Togo, and we're in a community called Noche in southern Togo, is basically to go and learn from the community and try to basically support them. When you say support, it's not pejorative at all. We're not coming in as outsiders to support them. No, we just, because we strongly believe that we don't have to reinvent the wheels, basically. There are things that have been done, in the West here, in other places in Africa, in other communities, across the globe that could be used and adjust and adapted, to the specific context of those communities, right? And there are some knowledge that are in those communities that we also can learn from, that can also be shared with other communities. So our main project in Togo is called the Ecosystem Restoration Project. And with that project, we basically set up a tree nursery in partnership with the University of Idaho, and then in partnership with community-based organizations and national organizations in Togo in order to basically make the project sustainable, right? So our main partner on the ground is a cooperative of women. Basically, this cooperative has 75 women, and they do everything in the community. They're in, they're a cultural group. The year that we went to Togo to set up our first nursery was in 2016. That year, they just won the national award for community traditional dance performance. These ladies are also engaged in environmental work. They basically embedded in the fabric of the community that we work in, right? So it was just, we were just lucky to be able to find such a partner in our first try in the community. And they are so important in our engagement in that community. They help us in everything from, reaching out to local authorities to basically filling out, introducing us to, the key stakeholders in the area. And that was very fundamental for our success in the community. And the fascinating thing about it is because people overvalue the Western education, is that within that group of 75, only one person had the highest education in the group was third grade education. And yet these people were kicking quote unquote ass in the in the community, and they were recognized as such, as leaders in their community. So it wasn't easy to reach out and build trust in the community, but going in through that group basically made our work very easy, right? And I wanted to just take a few minutes, maybe 1 or 2 minutes to address how we built our community network, maybe, and then later on that basically generate trust in the community. So when you work in those communities, you have to acknowledge that you're coming into a different fabric, societal fabric. It's not the US type of society, right? Power might not reside when you think power resides, right? And the one person that you might not see as important could actually derail your project pretty fast. So we were able to reach out to, so they were able to introduce that, and we were able to reach out to folks within that community, right? Horizontally within the community, meaning that all the stakeholders within that community. Anybody from the traditional chief to local youth development leaders to local the city official to county official in that community, right? We met and state forest worker, because we're working on ecosystem restoration, so we gotta work with forest workers, right? State forest workers, local forest workers, NGOs that engage in the forestry work. So we were able to introduce us to them. We had multiple meetings. We learned from them. We did workshop that they taught us stuff. We taught them stuff as well. And before even we implemented the project, in fact, in that first trip in 2016 to set up the nursery, we also did some rapid rural appraisal to basically get people's engagement and what they will want us to grow. So we decided based on the result, we decided to basically focus on native species only. And then and not just native species, but the native species that are endangered, basically, that are on the IUCN list. And some of the stories they told us were stories where, folks remember when they were young, where they will go and then, get fruit trees that do not exist anymore, right? And then get fruit from fruit trees and all type of stuff. So we end up having our nursery based on that. And also, quickly enough, we also reach out to other communities so that's still the horizontal within the community. So within the community and across community now, because Noche is a town, but around Noche we have multiple villages with their own development agenda and other stuff. And we knew that the seedlings that we're gonna be working on and the forest, the community forests that are gonna be reforested and reforested are also in those communities. So we reach out to within community, across community. I don't know if you understand what I'm trying to say. So in each one of those villages around, we reach out to them and talk to folks within there as well. And now beyond that, we also reach out to folks in the across leadership vertically this time, because there are levels of government and levels of leadership in the community, right? And you gotta reach out to folks in local government, folks in county government, folks in national government, and make sure that you're not walking on anybody's toes, and making sure that whatever you bring in country, actually fit within their own development agenda, that you don't bring something to, that is totally foreign to them. And the good thing for us, we're so lucky that they were already in the process of working on the SDG, Sustainable Development Goals, right? And then they set up this local community development, and then multiple local will come together and form city level or village level, and the villages and cities will come and form the county level, all the way to national level. So we were able to reach out to each one of those and introduce ourselves just as learning. We reach out to learn the universities in country, the school system. They play a huge role in what we do in country. In fact, in addition to the women group, we also have a youth leadership group that we basically created in country by reaching out to various schools in the town that we work in. And that youth leadership group is basically to generate and create excitement for reforestation project and excitement for what we, community engagement in the area. So over time, that paid off, because now we have become a reference in the community, right? Governments are reaching out to us, NGOs are reaching out to us, local authorities are reaching out to us, traditional chiefs are reaching out to us, the school systems are reaching out to us to help them organize training workshops, to train them on the tree nursery science, to train them on reforestation science, to train them on everything leadership, basically. And we've gained that trust, but it was not easy. Obviously, we were not able. We still have struggles to go through. For example, one of our main struggles is with nomadic herders. That basically, as nomadic, they're not from the community. They usually come from outside, but they impact our reforestation effort, because they go basically and destroy everything that we plant. And we've been doing that for years now. We haven't been successful, but just to tell you, even though we have good success with folks in the community and the cross community, we haven't been that successful with folks from outside that might come in only for a few months and leave and come back, and this might not be the same folks next year. So I wanted to stop there, and so I don't take too much time. So thank you for the opportunity to share our story with our stories with you. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Ro. That was great. And I think there'll be a lot of questions and discussion that come out of some of the themes you touched on there, especially with knowledge sharing and that stakeholder engagement. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing those stories. I think next we're going to try and bounce over to Dr. Ed, who is going to talk a little bit about knowledge sharing in a different way across 2- and 4-legged creatures. So Ed, if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself, we'd love to hear your story.
Thank you, Dr. Casey. I have to make a correction in my intros because in giving all the phrases and good works of Dr. Casey, I forgot to tell you something about me. I'm a Yaqui Indian with a territory in Arizona as well, but Arizona and the northern mountains of Mexico is our tribal lands. Anyway, I want to talk about quickly. I was real pleased with Casey to have building trust and community talk. So first I want to define what that means. What communities are we talking about? So where I work with the most are these other communities, besides the 2-legged. We work with 4 legs, wings and plants and water. They're their own community. And sometimes the 2-legged kind of forget about these other legs and wings and fins. And that's another story. But anyhow, I want to talk about that. And I want to talk about working with indigenous communities, specifically the Shoshone-Bannock and Shoshone-Paiute. We're in the southern part of our state of Idaho and in the USA. I want to talk about some indigenous teaching I learned in my trails. They're from the Mi'kmaq tribe. You might say, where are they at? Well, they're in Nova Scotia. From Nova Scotia to Boston to Maine is Mi'kmaq territory. So you'll quickly discover, when we talk about communities, they're related to other communities, like circles within circles within circles. And the Mi'kmaq, I went to go see, they have a college there, and I talked to an Elder Marshall, and he talked about two-eyed seeing. That's what he calls it, two-eyed seeing. So with one eye, you look at Western science, and the other eye, you look at indigenous science, and you look for that intersection in the middle. That's two-eyed seeing. And I asked him if I could use that, and he said yes. And I asked him if I could add to that, and he said, yeah. I said, what do you want to do? And I told him I wanted to put 2 ears listening, because I'm not sure people see what they see all the time. I'm not sure they listen what they hear all the time. And so not only do we think about that, but when we try to work with students, and Casey was in on this to help me, we try to use the native language in the subject matter we're dealing with. So they hear native language and English language, see indigenous ways and Western ways, and it starts to make sense in their way of thinking. And so I wanted to make sure I gave credit to the different tribes. There's a great paper just recently written by Charles Choi, January this year, in a journal called Mysteries. It's kind of cool. And I want to talk about my next community member, he, she, it. You know, I use that pronoun there. He, she, it goes by the name of Castor candenitas, is his Latin name. Castor fiber is the one in Europe. His common name is beaver. His Shoshone name is hene. And if people are really angry and upset, which I've been in that discussion, he goes by other names, but I can't share that with you right now because you're too nice of folks. But they're none of those languages. There are other ones that have a lot of anger with them, but that's another story as well. The castor kinesis and the castor fibers are 2 different species, even though they look alike. The castor fiber in Australia has 48 chromosomes. The castor candenisis in North America is 40, so they're 2 different chromosomes. Beavers make ponds to swim in because when they walk on the ground, they're like walking sausages. They're great big and short legs, and coyotes and wolves and cats and everything like to eat them. But they get in the water, they're supreme. The only thing that can match them are otters, and they swim. So they make these ponds, and in doing that, they really help with climate change. If you understand their teachings, they're trying to teach. You might say how? Well, when they make their dams and raise water level, it provides water in the riparian zone. So plants get to green up, trees get to green up, larger animals come to feed. But that's important because their dams and their ponds are in the climate change schema of things. For example, the ponds that act as a refuge when we have fires. We've had many fires in our country where I live, and the ponds act as a refuge for animals that can't run or can't fly or can't swim as fast. To get away from fires, they can go in these ponds, and the ponds have a growing all this vegetation. They help capture CO2 in the atmosphere, which is a big deal. And I'm just about done with my time here, Casey. Oh, one last thing before I go about time. Time is a relative factor. We already talked about that. But like in Hawaii, for example, when elders get together, usually take 2 days to introduce each other, not 60 seconds. And so, but I'm going to honor the rules here and keep going. The big takeaway that we human two legs are not alone in their efforts to restore ecosystems. Engineers and keystone species like beavers have doing this all along. They don't ask for permission. They don't ask for license. They don't ask for pay. They just do it. And so my last sentence here is that I think we should make more progress to working with these keystone speakers rather than against them, and make President Lincoln hats out of their skins. I don't think that's a good use of their spirits. That's it. Thank you, Casey. See, I did it, Casey. I didn't take 2 weeks. I wanted to take longer, but I won't. So thank you.
I'm sorry that we had to limit it at all, Ed, but hopefully you can keep sharing some of those stories through the discussion and Q&A. So thank you so much for sharing that. From here, I think we'll bounce next to Becky, who I think is also going to talk about, we're having a theme come out here on knowledge sharing, but we'll see if that's another topic that she hits on. Beck, do you want to go ahead and take over?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Wow, I'm so humbled and honored to be here and on this panel and following up such wise folks with such incredible insights. So I'll talk a little bit, as Casey mentioned, about co-production and reciprocity. So I first wanted to share a story and then give a few lessons that really overlap with my colleagues that shared previously as well. So my first experience on the African continent, where I have since spent many years, was in Malawi in 2004. And I was working with the Human Health and Environmental Sustainability nonprofit that had worked in country for over a decade. So built existing relationships with the ministry and with local communities. And they're now training doctors, nurses, and dentists across the country. What I learned specifically from this experience was that working and listening with community members and farmers was that while alternatives to deforestation would be welcomed, cutting down trees was a key for boiling water, feeding families, surviving one more day. And there was also extensive human-wildlife conflict, where while we, as Westerners, had begun to come in and set up basically wildlife protection or wildlife preserves and removed people from them, this had caused a slew of issues, including the fact that there were still wildlife that were going and trampling people's farms. So what this really taught me was the importance and the complexity of human natural systems, and that we really must look at these issues holistically, as well as work with local communities and community members to both determine and understand and define problems, as well as determine the most appropriate selection to work with them to find solutions and develop outcomes to these problems at the local level. This also taught me many things that spurred in me the interest to transition from wildlife biology to human dimensions of natural resources and climate adaptation. I realized that we couldn't pull any part of the system out without really understanding the entire system. So before I sort of list a few of the lessons that I learned, I just want to share the way that I look at and see these terms. So knowledge co-production is collaboration that is contextual, goal-oriented, and includes people coming from diverse perspectives and experiences on equal playing fields. People are pluralistic and need to recognize the limitations of and expertise of everyone who's at the table. And that's from Nordstrom et al. 2020. And reciprocity is exchanges with others for mutual benefit. So a couple of the key things that I learned through my experience in the Intermountain West, as well as collaborating in Chile, in the Kyrgyz Republic with Casey and the TIFO team, and Doctors Without Borders, as well as across Malawi, Liberia, Kenya, and most recently Rwanda, is first of all that we need to understand the history and context. So this includes both past efforts and the effects of collaboration and conflict. And from my perspective as a researcher and project manager, there are specific potential efforts in terms of collaboration and also challenges and conflicts, but this also looks at, the history and histories of genocide on native and indigenous lands. Additionally, that we don't want to reinvent any wheels. So it's really important that we do our homework in all aspects. And then, as I just mentioned, that we understand who we are, that we understand our own positionality and internal community power structures, and that we work to diffuse power and include as many people as want to be included as possible. So this could mean really acknowledging gender imbalances and that no group is homogeneous, so that there's different socioeconomic statuses within that group, different education levels, etc., across the community. The second overarching lessons learned that I wanted to share was really working on process over outcomes and outputs. So it's critical when working with communities to engage early and often, as I highlighted before, all the way up from idea conception through outcomes. And typically the work that I do is not work that I go out and search for. I typically have partners or people that I have worked with in the past that come to me and say, hey, this is something that's been coming up in our community. Like, how could we potentially move forward with this? And then when possible, as I just mentioned, develop the research questions, the methods, and the outcomes with partners, and really have an iterative process so you can adapt along the way based on changes. And this is particularly critical in the face of changing climate conditions. So this also includes honoring multiple ways of knowing and local and indigenous knowledge as equally valid and critical to, in addition to scientific knowledge. So, as equally valid scientific knowledge. So lastly, the point that I wanted to highlight was building trust through relationships and follow through. So again, last but not least, it's always critical to work with community gatekeepers. So folks that have long-standing trust and relationships within a community. And to, as my other colleagues have highlighted, to listen first and listen more, and then act, and then listen more. To be open to seeing through different lenses, as well as partnering with humility and empathy, understanding and working towards reciprocity. So as I mentioned before, co-production is all about trying to understand collectively how to move forward in a way that really solves on the ground problems and provides outcomes that are useful for people to build their adaptive capacity and their community adaptive capacity in the face of changing climate conditions. And the last, as a researcher, I think it's really important to acknowledge that it's okay and we need to be willing to take the passenger seat.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Beck. That was great. And I love all the common themes that are coming out from folks so far. So thank you for sharing those stories and perspectives. I think next we'd love to have Austin share some stories with us. I think about some of his work with the intertribal forest management. Intertribal forest.
One of those long acronyms.
It's one of those, it's IFAP. I don't remember exactly how it goes, but anyway, I'll let you take it from here and do a much better job than I could.
Okay, thank you, Casey. And yeah, thank you everyone for presenting great presentations. I think I have a lot of similar points that Becky just made, as far as, being inclusive and really taking a holistic approach to working with the community you're in. So yeah, I thought it was appropriate for this talk to talk about my experience with the Intertribal Forestry Management Assessment Team, so IFMAT for short. And as part of that team, I was a student participant. So I was one of 5 tribally affiliated students on the team. And so what IFMAT is every decade, there is a comprehensive review of Native American forestry programs. And so what they're trying to figure out is kind of what has worked and what hasn't over the last decade. And the review is implemented by the Intertribal Timber Council, which is mandated as part of also another acronym, the National Indian Forest Resources Management Act, or people call it NFIRMA. And that was enacted in 1990. So I was part of IFMAT 4. This is like the 4th one. So 40 years of review of Native American or tribal forestry programs. So yeah, what was my experience? As part of the IFMAT core team, which is made up of about 10 to 15 different forestry experts in their fields, so like different forestry disciplines. The core team as a whole was able to travel to over 40 reservations in person all around North America, and do an on-site visit and meet with tribal foresters and cultural resource folks, and really all levels of management within the tribe. And so as a student participant, I was fortunate enough to travel to 5 of those site visits. And that was mainly where I'm from in the Pacific Northwest. And so I went along with the core team on those site visits. During those site visits, I was tasked with leading the cultural resources survey and discussion. And so what I did is gather all elders and lead gatherers, or really any community members that were kind of the leaders in their cultural resource department, and surveyed how they thought the forest was being managed, and got their perspective on the legacies of what has been going on in their reservation and their Aboriginal territories. So some of the insights I had from those discussions and my experience was that each tribe is really immensely different. Some of these tribes are within a 100-mile proximity to each other, but the way they're structured culturally and governmentally structured is crazy different. And so that alone was really surprising to me and really eye-opening in the way that not only the IFMAT team comes in, but outside organizations might come in and work with these tribes. they each hold their own perspectives on what's important to them. And so really coming at it from an understanding of what that might is, or what that might be, is really important when you're working with these communities. Another important takeaway that I had from this experience was, and maybe a common theme, but again, very different, was that a lot of tribes, you know, held cultural value way above and beyond, you know, resource like value as it is. So like resource extraction value, or, you know, fresh water, or timber resources. You know, it was looked at it at kind of a generational perspective, or, you know, it was much deeper than that. It wasn't just, hey, there's that standard timber we need to take care of. It was like, what is it providing us, and how are we related to that thing? And so a good example is I think Ed's example is, you know, we see beaver, or recognize beaver as not a separate animal or anything, but as beaver, as you know, something that is existing alongside of us, or tribes. And so really seeing it from that viewpoint, I think is crucial to understanding how tribes view the significance and importance of their resource. And really goes to understand, you know, who they are, where they come from, how they've always been there, and the relationship that they have with that land. So I have 3 main points on maybe what outside organizations can do when working with a Native American tribe. Is 1, go in with an understanding with what the governmental structure, like I said, a lot of them are really complex and different. That's kind of a product of the whole dynamic of the trust responsibility, and, you know, yeah, so, and also understanding how, how they historically have been treated by outside organizations like the US government. My second point is, you know, this idea of climate action and climate change is really urgent, and it's hard to be patient and, you know, take time to build these internal relationships. But it's so important when working with tribes that, you know, have been historically mistreated. And it really showed on the IFMAT team. Like most of the people that I was traveling with either had formerly worked with the tribe, and, you know, even though their mission was, you know, objective and really trying to get a grasp on what happened in the last decade, specifically on their forest, like within their forest management realm, it went beyond that, and they knew about their family and would show up, and like everyone was hugging, and, you know, it was really sincere, and they really took the time to, you know, not get down to business right away, I guess. And so that was really, I think, an important aspect of just making the dialogue more open. My third point is, again, recognizing the difference between cultural resource and the resource extraction value. And so I think finding a common ground and working together really stems from understanding what each party values and what they're fighting to protect ultimately. And yeah, that can lead to some awesome partnerships, hopefully. So yeah, I think I'll wrap it up there. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Austin. That was perfect. So it really tied together a lot of the different themes that have already come out, and that was fantastic. And I think really helped set me up well for what I wanted to talk about, which is time. So I'll just kind of give a short experience related to that, and then I really want to open it up to questions and discussion. I think we can go over, Rhonda, I think you said maybe by about 15 minutes. So if folks have that time in their day and they want to stick around for extra questions and discussion, please feel free. But I'll be brief so that we have time for some of that within the hour mark. I wanted to come back to the title of today's talk, which is about building trust. And in thinking about lessons that we've learned from everyone here today, and that TIFO has learned working in a really wide swath of communities around the world, one theme that always stands out to me is time. And we could come up with a cute catchphrase that the T in trust stands for time. I fully realize that the climate crisis needs urgent action, that these environmental issues are causing enormous burdens to communities that are already marginalized and vulnerable. But I also know of many examples, including the ones that people just gave us, of why implementing meaningful projects in partnership with communities, not for communities, not imposing them on communities, really doing this in partnership and support with the communities. Those take time. And so I have two examples, but I think I'm actually just going to share one in the interest of saving time. And I think I'm going to talk a little bit about Nigeria. We worked there for 12 years, responding to an outbreak of lead poisoning in children that initially, in the early days of the outbreak, took 400 lives. And that was back in 2010. And so TIFO was part of a response team that included international agencies, including World Health Organization and Doctors Without Borders, but also Nigerian federal, state, local governments, traditional leadership, which was probably the most powerful entity and the most respected entity in the villages we worked in, as well as religious leadership. Our team, which was really the state, local, and traditional leadership governments, along with TIFO, we spent a lot of months working in really isolated villages in Zamfara State, which is in the northern part of Nigeria. And we were doing environmental assessments, looking at soil lead contamination, which was what was poisoning the kids. And so we really spent months working in these isolated villages, driving back to the town that we were living in, day out, as this large team. At one point, we based our operations in a more remote location because some of the villages we worked in were like 4 hours from the town we'd been living in. And so by living in a community called Begega, we were able to spend less time in the car every day, just going 30 minutes to some of these communities instead of 4 hours. And so when we were living in Begega, we already knew that Begega had some areas that had been impacted by lead poisoning. We knew that there were mining operations in that area that had caused some contamination. But really, everybody in Begega was really hesitant to talk to us. And that's the state government, the local government, myself, because all those people were really outsiders. The local government base was like 4 hours, 3 hours away from these communities. So we were all coming into these villages as outsiders. And the reason they were so hesitant to work with us was because artisanal mining is considered to be illegal. And they were afraid that if the government found out, or that if TIFO started telling other organizations about artisanal mining in the area, that they could lose their only source of income. And so they really didn't engage with us too much. And in the meantime, our team kept working in other villages while living in Begega, and we employed a few people from Begega to work with our team in these other areas. And after several months, one of our team members, one of our coworkers from Begega, really quietly approached us and asked if we would test the soil in his compound for lead, in his home compound, which we did. We gave him the results. We talked to him about what the results meant. And then another one of our coworkers asked us to do the same thing. And then it was kind of like word was starting to get out a little bit. And the next person who asked us to test his home was the village leader, the village head. And once that happened, things really began to shift, and we started getting a lot more openness and involvement from the community. But that took months of living there before people really realized that even though we'd been saying we weren't there to shut down mining, even though we'd been saying that we were just there to try and help work together to find solutions so that mining could continue, but children's health could also be protected. You know, you can say all those things, but until you show it, sometimes trust takes time. It was years of coming back to Begega before we were able to work in that community and do the full-scale remediation and environmental cleanup there. And we had to keep showing up, and it was the same faces coming back every time that I think really made the difference there. So trust takes time, and I think everybody touched on that here today in terms of talking about knowledge sharing and support not being pejorative. Like it takes time to figure out what community priorities really are. The two-eyed seeing and two-eared listening, I think also obviously is not a quick process. Co-production of knowledge, as well as understanding community values and the cultural value people hold over resources, as well as understanding the difference between communities and also the heterogeneity within communities. So all of those things take time. And with that, I think I would love to turn, well, first, what I want to do is thank our panelists because they did an incredible job of telling all these stories and tying them all together without us ever meeting in one group ahead of time to do it. So that was fantastic. And thank Rhonda and Earth Gives for organizing this. This has just really been fascinating and exciting for me to listen in and participate. So with that, I think we'll do some questions. I know there's one question in the chat already. Rhonda, do you think we should try and start there?
Sure, and I believe it was directed to Ro, correct?
That's correct. So Abu had a question for Ro, and I'll just read it really quickly in case folks aren't looking at the chat. He asked, Ro, do you know why your communities of practice have not been able to prevent the invasive ranchers, the nomads, from impacting the lands that you're doing the restoration work on?
Yeah, thank you so much for the question, and thank you so much for your incredible experiences that you've shared with us. You all mentioned, basically the same trend, basically time, commitment, and it's something that you have to, trust building is something that you have to do all the time. You cannot just do it once and just stop. You have to continuously do it. So with that in mind, you have to keep, nomadic herders usually come around for a few months and they're gone. They might not be the same people to come, the following year, right? That means that people who are taking those cows in are always changing, even though in country they have like a committee that oversees the transhuman activities in the communities, right? It's very hard to basically work with those herders, directly, because number one, they don't come from the country. They usually come from all the way from Niger. When there is a drought in the Sahara region, then they come down towards the coast where they can find green pasture, right? So because of that, because of the fact that it's always changing, they're never in the community, even though we've engaged them multiple times. I can't tell you how many community meetings we've had with them, with local chiefs, with the local police, and everybody, so that they could understand why they should stay away. For example, we have we have set aside a piece of land, about 25 hectares, to basically experiment all those species that we're producing. So we have some kind of a quote unquote experimental forest, and we work with them so that they could stay away from the places where we actually planted trees, right? And yet they will never listen because people are constantly changing. That's number one. So there is a remedy for that. The remedy is that they have a county level committee for transhumans. It includes the county commissioner, the sheriff, the police, the chief of the police, the director of ag, the director of environmental protection, and the director of the Togolese Forest Service. But basically anybody that anybody could go to them and sue any of those people who are committing, trespassing on their lands or destroying their crops or anything. The problem is that they are corrupt. That's basically what it is. Because I know those people. We've networked with them. We work with them every day, and that was the only problem that we could not solve in country, right? So I started digging in. And finally, some community members started opening up about the real reason why they're not doing anything to stop it. Because a lot of them have their own cows in those herds, and then those who don't have the cows that they bought and are given to the nomadic herders so that they could actually raise them for them. They're given cows that they can use for their own personal use. So as such, they will never budge. No matter, so you go to this person, they will tell you go see the other person, and it was like a ping pong game. They sending us all the way, and only the director of the environment was able to give us some kind of I wouldn't call that remedy, but at least he came to see the destruction on the land, and basically ask us to basically we had two choices: either to fence the land or put signs all around the property and saying that cows are not allowed, and if we ever get a cow there, they're gonna get this amount of penalty and all those stuff. So we couldn't afford to fence 25 hectares. So we spent about 1,200 to put signs around the land, which in Togolese money is a lot of money to waste to do the sign. We did it, and even that did not stop anything. And they're so aggressive. I remember one time I was in country. I went to the piece of land. I went to the land. Somebody called me early in the morning that they saw cows on the property. So I went in. These people, they know how to talk to their cows. The cows, they talk to the cows. The one with big horns basically surrounded us, basically. And we had to basically deflect the conflict and tell them, we're not here for a fight. We just want you not to destroy our seedlings and stuff like that. So we haven't been able to solve the problem. It's because of two reasons. The nomadic herders are constantly changing. They're not the same people. And the number two, local corruption.
Wow. Thank you, Ro, so much for sharing that. It sounds like, I think the lesson to take away from that is that these are complex problems that don't have simple solutions, right? And so it, again, over time and over working on all those different angles, hopefully you all are able to figure something out. I know if anyone can, it's you and your team.
One problem I could never solve in that community. It's so frustrating.
Yeah, it is, absolutely. And I think we probably all have similar experiences where we could relate. Yeah.
Hey, Casey, I just posted a question for you in the chat, but I thought I should throw a light on it a little bit. I worked with you a little bit in Nigeria on that project you spoke about, and thank you for all the leadership and all the service that you've been providing over the years. Those of us in Africa really appreciate your support. But the question I had was, based on your experience or lessons learned, yes, I agree, trust takes time, but also there is the urgency of the issues. For example, exposure to lead poisoning. Those kids, those women, they're not going to wait for the time needed to build a trust. So how do we reconcile those two to make sure that we're able to address those urgent issues while at the same time we take time to build trust?
Yeah, it's a great question, Abu. I think the fortunate thing is when we are working in Nigeria, the more urgent the issue is, I think the less time that's needed to build those relationships. So when we were first there in 2010 in Doretta and Argama, because the kids were visibly sick, there was a lot less hesitation on the part of the communities to collaborate with all of these other agencies within their country and outside their country. And so that, I think as that level of urgency went down, that's when we had to do more work with trust building, because lead poisoning is such a silent issue. As you know really well, it doesn't have clinical manifestations until it's really, really severe. And so low and moderate level lead poisoning, kids look like they're perfectly healthy. And that's where we have to spend a lot more time working on these trust building issues. And ideally, yes, we would shut off that exposure the next day if we could. But in terms of sustainability, the only way to do that is really to impose a lot of really restrictive measures on a community. And those just aren't going to last in the long term. And so you have to weigh that need to do something right away with wanting something to work in the long run. Otherwise, it's going to go right back to the way it was before. I would love to throw that question out to other panelists as well, unless we have, I'd love to throw that out to other panelists as well. How do you reconcile that urgency that we all feel to do something about the issues we all work on with the need to take time to build these relationships? No one wants to jump in. There we go. Somebody's unmuting.
Go for it. Do you want to go, Ro?
Go for it, Becky. I will go later.
Okay, I'll just say a couple things. I think, I think human behavior and the influence of social norms is so interesting. And, that's why it is very critical to work with people who have extended relationships in the community or, are from the community when we first start any of these processes. And as you said, Casey, the urgency or the critical nature of life and death, often in the work that TIFO does around health and environmental justice and those issues, we'll see more and more with these, changing climate conditions. As that also increases conflict in those, in those sorts of things. But I still really believe that if we go in authentically and humbly with the acknowledgement that we have expertise in something, but the folks on the ground in their communities have way more expertise in what they're experiencing. And, so how do we really come together? How do we listen and trust that as urgently as we need to take action, it will happen? If it is still led by, by community efforts and by sort of, us also leaning on our own expertise around, health and environmental issues and those sorts of things. So I still really believe that those things are not mutually exclusive.
Thanks, Beck. That was great. Rhonda, where do you think we're at?
Well, I think that this was amazing. And I am so appreciative of everything that you all have done. So I just kind of, I guess maybe it makes sense to sort of jump into, thank you all. And if there's, an opportunity to have everyone get in touch with you, please let us know. I mean, we've got your email up here. Certainly to learn more, and hopefully there'll be journeys and partnerships and collaborations that will continue along the way. I'm gonna think like a beaver, remember that I've got 2 ears and 2 eyes, and I want to be a passenger in the journey alongside a community, wherever it may be. So I really appreciate everything that you all have said. And next month, our Community Commons Impact Makers is going to be on wisdom learned from the climate track at South by Southwest. So a little bit different kind of information coming in, but if you have other ideas that you're interested along the way or just want to have conversation and connect, please feel free to do that along the way. Thank you all for being a part of this. Casey, do you have any parting words or thoughts to share with everyone?
Just gratitude. Thanks everyone for joining, for sharing their stories and questions, and being a part of this journey as we try and learn how to do better all the time. And that's it. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for everything that you do on behalf of all the walking, moving, growing things on this planet that we hope to celebrate every day. And let's go build community and build trust. Thank you all. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, you for
everybody.
the opportunity. Yeah.
Thanks,
Bye.
folks. Thanks. Yeah, appreciate you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. It was a pleasure to meet you, Ro and Becky and Austin and Jeannie, all the board members from TIFO and Casey. Fantastic. Thank you guys so much.